And I admit there were parts where I'm like, well, hold on. There's little floating things. Oh, those are so cute. What are they doing? Oh my gosh, they have parrots. I don't think they're nice. And the gray heron. Oh, that's a whole other story about that one. Trying to avoid spoilers at all cost. However, I was pulled in immediately. Hi, I'm Teresa. Welcome to Cocoon Cast, where we deep dive into movies and discuss all things cinema.
Hi, I'm Rebecca. Today we'll be discussing the new movie, The Boy and the Heron.
Rebecca, let's get started.
Mahito once lived an idyllic life in Tokyo, but that was before his mother was a wartime casualty in a hospital fire. Now, as he and his father moved to the country to start a new life, a heron spirit beckons him into a world beyond. As Mahito spends his time between the two dimensions, he starts to question, what is his life defined by? His family's traumatic past or the nebulous promise of the future?
Rebecca, you are excited because this is the last movie of
Hayao Miyazaki.
Easy for you to say. And tell me about this.
This is a really bittersweet movie for me.
Oh,
I've literally grown up with Miyazaki films for the longest time. Miyazaki is one of the first animated directors that I can just name off the top of my head. Somebody says, what's an animated director you love? Hayao Miyazaki. I can just dive deep into his movies all day long, but I don't think our cinema community would be up for that. It's also bittersweet for me because he's still alive. It's not like the man has passed away. This is his last project. He wanted it released to the world, and sadly, he's no longer here to share it with us. It's really strange for me knowing that he's still out there, but he's consciously choosing not to make movies. Miyazaki is one of those directors that I can see long living past his output of work in terms of just sheer impact.
Rebecca, Miyazaki is 82.
Isn't that so wild?
That
He's
is
still
so
so passionate about movies that he just had to keep telling stories until he's like, that's it, no more.
If you're a storyteller, that doesn't go away. It's not you reach a certain age and suddenly that fades. Maybe his commitment to a movie, this movie took 7 years in production.
That's correct. These movies take at least 3 or 4 years to make.
And even then, if you think about how beautiful they are, the movie was over 2 hours long. That's not a 15-minute, half-hour segment. That is literally a story. In this movie, The Boy and the Heron had so many twists and turns. I really was losing track at one point of the characters, who they were going to see, where they were going, why. And to me, each scene could be its own short film.
Well, and I believe this is accurate, having known you for a good chunk of time. This is your first Miyazaki film, correct?
This is my first full Miyazaki film, meaning I've seen glimpses and snippets. And I laughed. You and I were talking, and I said, on the way to the studio, I said, how many of these have you seen? Because as you said, you've grown up with them. Obviously, I was going to say I've grown up with you, but I probably should be you've grown up with me. But you were saying, you recall how many, what percentage you remember saying that you've seen?
I believe accurately that I've seen a good 95 to 98% of his filmography.
Wow. And this is literally my first one.
And I was talking to you because I would love to be in your shoes in some ways, because if you think about it, whenever I show you a Miyazaki film now, you're going to be working backwards from your knowledge of this. You've seen the man completed at the peak of his artistic prowess, and now you're going to see how he developed it. It's so fascinating to me.
That's a great point. It's funny when you say that, because I wouldn't have thought of it that way. But that's a great way to look at that, because as you said, you've seen it, maybe not from start to finish, but you've obviously seen a lot more than I have in real time versus me. But that's an interesting concept to go. You're going backwards to the beginning, which I see myself actually going back and seeing more of these films. I really enjoyed it. Although like I said, there are parts that were a little bit confusing. I understand there's a lot of fantasy element. There's a lot of history, symbolism. There's a lot going on in this story.
This film is very Jungian.
Everything is Jungian these days, aren't they?
I'm so glad it is. I'm so sick of Freudian.
Well, he did work for the man, so yeah, I know. Somewhere it's there.
But I was so interested to see this film, not only because it's a Miyazaki film, but partially because the lack of information that was being floated about this movie. there was almost no information. In fact, we barely got the announcement of the voice cast before the official release.
We saw it for clarification in Japanese with English subtitles intentionally.
That is correct. Thankfully, our local theater chain decided to make this choice. I'm always really excited to see when AMC takes the original language and presents it to the wider cinema community. I know for me, one of the interesting features of watching a Miyazaki film is seeing how the dub changes the story in some ways. I was talking to you about that.
Yes, I remember that. Somehow Billy Crystal's name floated out. And we were able to see it at our local AMC in IMAX on a Monday morning, or excuse me, a Monday evening, and it was pretty full.
Miyazaki fans are diehards.
No kidding. And it's not that I didn't know it completely, but there's something about it, meaning I'm sure there are people like me, maybe have not seen it, and they're like his swan song, no pun intended, and they're like, I want to see it before he goes away, if you will. That wasn't my motivation. It was, this is a great opportunity to see high caliber. You were saying the animation is wonderful. The stories are wonderful. The music, it sounds like the music stood out for you in this one also.
The music to me is a really important character in these films. It really adds emotional depth, but it also can kind of give you some hints about character motivation that doesn't necessarily become clear unless you've seen the movie more than once. So I think it kind of adds that additional layer of just storytelling that it's hard to find with lesser composers. And I'm so glad to see that Miyazaki takes this seriously. Animated films are strange to me because they occupy this place in regular artistic culture where it's believed one of two things. Either it's for kids.
Yes, that's true.
Or it's purely an artistic medium. I'm in the artistic medium camp. There are so many stories you can tell in animation. And I think it's so cool to take these themes and elements and parlay them into a story that people of different ages can find different layers to and share them with each other.
You grew up watching a number of these movies. And I looked around, most of the people around us were adults. However, several rows down, I'm not sure if you had seen it, there was a dad and I think it was a mom back of someone's head. And this little girl, she looked like, 3, maybe 4, and she, was holding her dad's hand. And I thought, she's going to pick up on a few things. She's not going to get the full effect or the full story, but at 3 or 4, there is something I believe she's going to walk away with versus some movies that are, R-rated or a little bit more intense where you go, I don't think Terminator was for her or Alien was for her. I don't know if she's going to walk away with anything other than being afraid. But it felt like maybe that's for mom or dad or, parents or the adults that are escorting her to their film. This didn't feel that way. It felt natural to see the diehards and the heavy fan base. It really did have that feel in terms of inclusivity, in terms of age, but also just different people. It didn't seem like one person or one type of person or even one gender of person is represented in these movies.
That's one of the other things I love about these films is Miyazaki tries to tell different layers of story. I can tell you some of the things that I would get out of a film, like, say, Howl's Moving Castle. I got many different things I got out of that at the age of 10 than I can say now at my age.
The other part that really stood out to me is obviously this is an animated film. The animation I thought was really great. There were parts of it where the main characters were in the distance and you couldn't necessarily make out all the details. But do you recall that you'd made a comment about when one of the characters was sleeping?
One of the things I love about Studio Ghibli productions is they're not afraid to give a scene as much detail as it needs to exist and communicate the idea. There's a scene where our main character, Mahito, is sleeping, and it's interesting because you can see his breathing. It's not defined to the point of distraction. It's defined to the point of you can tell he's sleeping, but you can see the lines kind of curving in and out, which kind of gives the impression that his chest is moving up and down. I think that's really smart because we only need as much detail as we know to craft a story. But if you give a story too much detail, you start to get lost in the minutia of it.
I know at one point, Mahito, the main character, the young man, you were talking about the sleeping. I also had noticed when he, had a slight head injury, which is key to the story. I'm trying not to spoil too much. But there's that part where not only the breathing, but just the creases in the bed and just every little detail. But like you said, it didn't feel like you're getting lost in it. And I appreciated the sleeping because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how would you know an animated character is sleeping? You could hear him, right?
The sound design is excellent in these movies too. It feels very real.
I like that it was the sound design as well as the visual. Because I think just doing the sound design would have been, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I don't think I would have thought much more of it had I not seen it and heard it. And I realized that sometimes I have a low bar when it comes to animation.
I think...
And that's not great. I'm not proud of them. I'm not like bragging, hey, I've got a low bar. I'm just noticing. I'm like, wow, I've had a historic low bar.
That's why I really encourage our cinema community to venture outside your expected zone.
Yes.
You never know who's going to pop up in your new zone to teach you something that, hey, I didn't know this was possible with film. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really sad when I see people in our cinema community go, I'm going to only stick to this kind of film. I'm only going to stick to this genre. I think you can learn so much from many different films and take them and incorporate them into your own artistic life.
I would love our cinema community to comment below. Maybe you've seen this movie. Maybe you have a similar experience that I have with animation, or maybe you've always loved animation. What's your favorite animated film? Do we have any questions from the box?
Seeing that this is Miyazaki's last film, do you think it's a worthy conclusion to his body of work and really represents where he's grown to?
I think so. I think this is Miyazaki telling on himself, so to speak. I've been noticing this trend with a lot of older directors. Steven Spielberg's Fabelmans. We have Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I've made the argument before that it's almost a metaphor for his creative work. But I think Miyazaki is in a very unique place. He's a landmark director in his film sector. And I think that because of that, he has this very interesting opportunity to say something about the industry that he's basically helped catapult into the rest of the world. I think it's kind of neat to see him take this meta perspective, but also transplant it into his story. There's a couple winks and nods to earlier Ghibli projects. It's not so much that it's distracting, but it creates this story that says, this is who I am, this is my art, take it.
One part that I noticed is Ghibli. And I'm thinking, what does that mean? I did not know. And I looked it up. And it was interesting because Miyazaki had chosen Ghibli. And they talk about in Libyan, it means desert wind, which we may or may not know. His idea for the studio, it blows through the anime industry. And you think about this hot wind blowing through. And I thought, boy, he was on it. And I remember I had shared that with you, and your first thought was, wow, he is one optimistic guy. And I thought, yeah, he is. He knew inside of himself he could do this, and he could change an entire industry.
And he's not the only one.
That's true.
He has gathered this stable full of people that believe in this vision. The best friend that he has is the producer of this film, but is also the president of Ghibli Films.
Correct. And he's 75. And we were talking earlier that so many of his team, as you will, composers, cinematographer, animators, I mean, so many of these people have walked this road with him. I see this, we were talking about the emotional aspect of it. I see this as a great loss when he ultimately retires and steps back.
It was really strange for me because this is not the first time he's announced he's retiring, but he means it this time. It's real, and it's so strange for me. I was talking with you a few minutes ago when we were getting prepped for the show.
Sure.
just how emotional I was going to be. I even talked to you before the movie was released. I said I might cry.
Yeah.
Because no matter how this film turned out, Miyazaki has made an impression. And I think that's kind of an inspiration to any other filmmaker, any other creative looking to make their mark. If they have a vision, they can follow through with it, and people will find them to share that vision.
Isn't that beautiful, though? And of course, I'm like, oh, you make me cry if you cry. Our cinema community cries. We're all crying now. But it is that piece where, as you said, if you have the vision, you put the vision out there, which is scary. Just you put yourself out there. Here you are. And what do? You look around, you go, is anybody around? Is anybody hearing this? And part of you wants it to be one, I want people to hear it and see it. And then the other part of you goes, oh no, what if some people find me and see me and hear me? It takes optimism that I have something wonderful to say and people will like it. And people love him.
Well, and there's another artist I love, Amanda Palmer. She wrote this fantastic book. It's called The Art of Asking. The first step, and she puts this so succinctly, of course, go out there and ask, do you want to be part of my art? And Miyazaki does this in an almost unintrusive, innocent way. He throws a hook. Here's a boy who lost his mom. Okay. There's a spirit that follows him. You're like, okay, now I'm interested.
And I admit there were parts where I'm like, well, hold on. There's little floating things. Oh, those are so cute. What are they doing? Oh my gosh, they have parrots. I don't think they're nice. And the gray heron. Oh, that's a whole other story about that one. Trying to avoid spoilers at all cost. However, I was pulled in immediately. And throughout the movie, I stayed engaged. Even when I was a little bit like, oh, hold on. I enjoyed the movie a whole lot more than I thought I would. But for me to be fully engaged in a genre that is newer to me, obviously characters I know nothing about until I'm introduced to them, but immediately, and there have been so many films that we've reviewed recently where I have not had that connection. I was thinking about Wish when we were talking about, Disney's advertising this 100 years of wonderment and excitement and animation and all that. And the Easter eggs, I just kept thinking, boy, it sounds like Wish. But I had such a higher regard for this movie. I mean, tenfold, hundredfold. And he's doing the same thing. He is winding down and he, like you said, is illustrating his body of work, putting himself out there one more time, and Easter eggs. And I didn't at all feel like, oh gosh, here it is. Oh, I know that character. Oh, wow, why'd they put that? That's random. It didn't feel that way. It felt very intentional.
And I'd like to remind our cinema community, the only experiences you've had with Ghibli films are me showing you tiny clips of scenes.
That's correct.
Art.
Yes.
And just generally talking about his films.
Correct.
You have not sat down, seen a full-length Miyazaki feature. You've seen maybe short film at most.
I'm laughing. Now I feel like, okay.
No,
maybe.
But I'm trying to prove a point to our cinema community. You are a hard person to keep your attention span. So
I am short attention span theater. That is literally one of my nicknames from you.
So to have this film just grasp you,
yes,
and you want to go along with it, that's an achievement.
Right. You're like, that is a huge achievement. If you know me, you know it's true. But I laugh because you're right. It is an achievement, especially given the fact I'd worked a full day, went right afterwards. And as we said, there were people that were, it's dark, it's slower, it's a longer movie. And we were losing a few people. And I understand that. That's not a commentary or meant to be disrespectful. It just says
it's a slow burn.
It's a hard one. Even if you're interested, they really wanted to be there. It's I mean, the big screen, everything. And I'm over there going, wow, the whole time. And I will say those little fluffy things, though, really are like super cute. And parrots, I will never look at the same way. I was like, don't trust the bird. Don't trust the bird.
I have some good news for you about some soot sprites.
Wow. Do we have any other questions from the box?
Being that the audience is a little bit more limited for this movie of who knows it's coming and is excited about it, try to pick 2 movies in your brain where if someone liked one of those two movies, they would really like this movie also, to kind of give them a comparison of who should be going to see this that may not think to go see it.
If you want to compare a film to this, I would say Fabelmans is a good example. It's Steven Spielberg's take on his life, but also how he sees it and how it changes him into the man we know he is today. I'd say Neverending Story is also a good comparison. It takes a lot of fantasy elements and translates them into emotional landscape that you can see in an abstract form. However, the best comparison I can give this movie to is When a Monster Calls. I feel like it's a very underappreciated movie about loss and how children experience it in their own world. If you liked any of those movies, you should put this at the top of your must-see list.
The movie that comes to my mind a lot is A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. And I understand we're talking about mental illness and things, but it's getting into someone else's reality, and this is fantasy. However, it's very real for the character, and it's really happening. And I know that some movies, it's hard to get into reality or wanting to know what's happening. And I think in that movie, you definitely would want to know. And it really is suspending what you know to be true to go into his space. The other one that came to my mind is Patch Adams. Yeah, I know. But Patch Adams talks a lot about resiliency, loss, and perseverance. Just overcoming obstacle after obstacle and living in a world where not everyone understands or it doesn't fully make sense to other people. The other one, I know our team, we were talking about, the animation was beautiful, but a lot of the mountains, some of the interiors were, painted, if you will. The clouds, I'm a sucker for the clouds.
You're always a sucker for a good cloud.
I am. And they were so beautiful at different points. I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. And what that reminded me is the movie We Love, A Hidden Life from a few years ago that did not receive any love from the Oscars. However, it is truly a beautiful, beautiful movie. And this movie felt comparable to me.
Would you say that because of the landscapes and the cinematography?
Some of that, but just the beauty of nature. I think they captured that, especially, again, with the clouds. Rebecca, it is that time where we have 5 flying moths hovering nearby.
Ooh, they're close today.
They're close today. On a scale of 1 to 5 moths, what do you think?
This is a 4 moth movie for me.
Wow. Number one reason for a 4.
Number one reason for a 4 moth movie. I would say this is an excellent sampler of what makes Miyazaki. But he still manages to surprise you even after all of these years. He still manages to find something that the audience isn't expected and twist it into the story. And it feels natural. It doesn't feel like I'm doing this because I've got to be original, dang it.
I appreciate that it feels very genuine. I would say for me, this is probably going to surprise you. I would say mine's a 4 and a wing.
Wow.
I know. And truly, I don't have much to compare it to. So I can't say, well, of all of his movies, this is the best. Well, of all the movies I've seen, this is his best. But the story, as I said, it engaged me the whole time. There were so many details in hearing your piece around that, saying, hey, there are some pieces that are new. And just the vision of someone and the longevity. I always appreciate people ending well. And to me, if this was his first movie, you're like, wow, this is good. It just keeps getting better. There's something to that. But for someone to put in this much detail, 7 years for this movie, I think that's dedication, and it clearly shows. So for me, 4 and a wing, I'm pretty solid on it. Thanks for joining us. We're always excited to create experiences to bring our cinema community together.
Watch the notifications for a review of the new movie, Godzilla Minus One. Then come back to the channel this weekend for our weekly show, Movies and More, where we will have more movie reviews, the latest Hollywood news, and commentary snark meant to amuse.
Please remember to like, subscribe, and to share our channel.
If you enjoyed this review, you might click the link to check out our review of Saltburn, or click the other link to watch last week's show, where we reviewed Lady Bird and Brooklyn in our special episode dedicated to Saoirse Ronan.
Remember, cinema community movies are better
Better
together.
together.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next review.